The Bible has long held a revered and foundational status within American society, influencing its laws, culture, and moral compass. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Yet this sacred text was tragically and selectively employed to justify one of the nation's darkest chapters, the institution of slavery. This was not an accidental misreading, but a deliberate theological construction. Pro-slavery advocates, predominantly in the southern states, meticulously crafted a theological framework to support their economic and social interests. They sought to legitimize the brutal practice of human bondage through religious sanction. This endeavor was driven by a profound desire to maintain a system that underpinned their wealth and societal structure. The manipulation tactics employed were systematic and insidious. They involved cherry-picking verses from Scripture, isolating them from their broader context. Furthermore, they often ignored the overarching themes and messages of the Bible. Instead, pro-slavery proponents imposed their own interpretations onto the text, twisting its meaning to fit their agenda. The ultimate goal was to legitimize the horrific practice of human bondage, presenting it as divinely ordained rather than a moral abomination. This selective approach created a powerful, albeit false, religious endorsement for an inherently unjust system. One of the primary biblical arguments used to justify slavery centered on the concept of servitude found in the Old Testament. Pro-slavery advocates frequently cited passages from books like Exodus and Leviticus, which contained laws and regulations concerning various forms of servitude. They claimed these texts demonstrated that slavery was divinely sanctioned. Their logic posited that if God allowed for forms of servitude in ancient Israel, then such practices were inherently acceptable in America. This argument conveniently overlooked crucial differences between biblical servitude and American chattel slavery. Biblical servitude often included provisions for protection, pathways to freedom, and was not exclusively based on race. In stark contrast, American chattel slavery reduced enslaved people to mere property, denying them any legal rights or human dignity. It was a hereditary system, trapping generations in bondage, and was characterized by horrific abuse and violence. The biblical concept of servitude, with its inherent protections and potential for liberation, bore little resemblance to the brutal reality of American slavery. Another profoundly damaging argument was derived from the curse of Ham narrative found in Genesis chapter 9. This story describes Noah cursing his son Ham's descendant Canaan to be a servant of servants to his brothers. Pro-slavery proponents twisted this narrative into a racist justification for the enslavement of Africans. They falsely interpreted Ham as the progenitor of African peoples and claimed that the curse destined them for perpetual servitude. This interpretation was entirely unfounded in the original biblical text and was a product of racist ideology. The curse was specifically directed at Canaan, not Ham, and certainly not at all people of African descent. This twisted interpretation provided a powerful theological justification for the dehumanization of African people. It allowed slaveholders to deny basic human rights, portraying enslaved individuals as inherently inferior and divinely ordained for bondage. The curse of Ham became a cornerstone of racist theology, fueling centuries of oppression. Pro-slavery advocates also drew heavily from New Testament passages, particularly epistles written by figures like Paul, which encouraged obedience and submission. Verses instructing enslaved people to obey their masters were frequently emphasized. These passages were presented as divine commands for enslaved individuals to accept their lot in life without resistance. The purpose of this argument was clear: to discourage any form of resistance or rebellion among the enslaved population. It sought to instill a sense of religious duty in enslaved people to remain subservient. This selective reading conveniently ignored the broader message of the Gospels and the New Testament. The overarching message of Christianity emphasizes love, compassion, justice, and the inherent dignity of all human beings. These core tenets directly contradicted the practice of slavery and the dehumanization it entailed. By focusing solely on verses about obedience, pro-slavery proponents distorted the true spirit of the Christian faith to maintain their oppressive system. The use of the Bible to justify slavery in America represents a profound and tragic distortion of religious principles. It was a deliberate act of theological manipulation designed to legitimate a system built on oppression, violence, and exploitation. This misuse contributed directly to the immense suffering of millions of enslaved people whose humanity was denied under the guise of divine will. This historical episode serves as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in selectively interpreting religious texts. When scripture is cherry picked and divorced from its broader ethical and contextual framework, it can be weaponized to support even the most heinous injustices. It underscores the critical importance of critically examining the motivations and biases of those who wield religious authority. Understanding this historical distortion is crucial for comprehending the enduring legacy of slavery and racism in America. It highlights how deeply ingrained religious justifications can become in perpetuating systemic injustice. This period in history stands as a powerful testament to the imperative of ethical interpretation and the pursuit of justice guided by genuine compassion.